Joy is your essential nature. Forget the notion that you have to suffer to attain joy.
You do not need to earn her favor. You don't need to earn her favor. She wants us to be happy.
She doesn't judge you. If you have a judging God, maybe you need a new God.
Hi, Kelly here, your priestess. So this week, instead of having your regular message, I wanted to post a podcast episode. So the Church of the Goddess sponsors a podcast, which is my other affiliate channel called the Girlfriend God Podcast, and it's all about goddess spirituality. And this week, I posted an episode about brick and mortar churches and the pros and cons of that. It's a discussion with 3 other people that do goddess work. And I thought it would be good if people that watch this channel see some of the challenges of creating such a church. And so I would encourage you to watch this podcast episode and then leave comments on the channel or send me an email at churchofthegoddess@gmail.com. Actually, I believe it's the churchofthegoddess@gmail.com. And it's the churchofthegoddess@gmail.com. And I'm looking for people that watch this channel. If you tune in for the Sunday morning message, I would really like to know what you would like to see happen with the building of an online community. Do you want a Facebook page? Do you want to do open Zoom calls? I think I would love that, where we could talk about the church and how we can come together and build it from the ground up. Because if you've been to the website, you know that I kind of started at 0. But I look and I see that there are people that regularly tune in to Priestess at the Altar, which I, of course, appreciate. So I hope that you enjoy this podcast episode. And I will see you in 2 weeks. I look forward to your comments about the episode and about the church and about how you want to get involved, how you want to build community, and what we can do in the name of the goddess together. Thanks for watching. I really hope you enjoy this episode. It's really good. Welcome to the Girlfriend God Podcast, a podcast in search of and in service to the divine feminine, bringing you an equal mix of academic research and emotional spiritual experience. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment. If you enjoy this podcast, share it with your friends, rate and review it if you're listening on a streaming platform. Follow on social media on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. Now, let's get in the flow.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of The Girlfriend God. Today, we're doing another panel episode, and I have with me Dominique, Flora, and Carla. I'm going to go around my little Hollywood squares and let you each all give a little brief introduction to yourself and to each other. I'm going to go in the order that you appear on my screen from left to right, which is Dominique, and then Flora, and then Carla. So Dominique, let's start with you.
Perfect. Hi, my name's Dominique. I'm the community coordinator for Women's Spirit Reclamation, which is a online women's spiritual community. It's a pretty amazing community. We do a lot of events. I'm also very into, I would say, politics a little bit, or just current affairs. I'm teaching a class in the fall called deprogram. What is it? I already forgot my little tagline, but it's about seeing and healing towards liberation. So I'm really into, the story behind the story, especially when it comes to United States history. So I'm just very excited to be here. I'm looking forward to this conversation because I'm really into the concept of coalition building right now. So thank you.
Fabulous. Flora?
Yes, hi, my name's Flora Ware, and I live in Vernon, British Columbia, Canada, with my wife and our son, and I'm a ceremonial priestess and founder of Earth Song Temple, and I'm also a sacred musician and a vocal coach. And so I'm also really excited to have been invited into this conversation because I've been really on this path of the goddess and the divine feminine reclamation for over 30 years since I was a young teenager. And so thrilled to see how this has spread and we've become, I think, more aware of each other because of the internet and in the last few decades. So there's definitely a rising movement around this. So thanks for having us, Kelly.
Thanks, Flora. And last but certainly not least,
So my name is Carla Ionescu, and on social media, I'm the Artemis expert. I suppose in the world, I'm the Artemis expert so far until someone else takes my place. So my research, my PhD is on the goddess Artemis and ancient Greek Roman goddesses and their rituals, and I am the founder of the Artemis Center, which is an online center for now, but hopefully one day it will be a brick and mortar center. So I'm very interested in, again, being part of this discussion. And I also have a podcast called The Goddess Project, where we talk about all things divine feminine that I kind of feel like talking about. And I actually like what you said, Dominique, about the story behind the story, because that has also been my sort of fascination with so here's a myth and then kind of dig around it and see what's around it, what's behind it, so I really like that as well, and that's one of my goals as well. So yeah, thanks for having me, Kelly.
fabulous. Yeah, when I came up with who I wanted to ask to talk about this, I thought this was a really good mix, and I think we're kind of all on the pro side, but I also feel like we're all very knowledgeable about what the con side or what the pushback could be. So I decided to title this episode, and by the way, I need no introduction. Not just because if you listen to the podcast, you're already well aware of who I am and what I do, and this is my agenda, and these are the things that I believe in. So the title of this episode is called Enter Here, the Pros and Cons of Brick and Mortar Churches, because as you all know, or maybe not, Flora, I don't know how much you pay attention to my feed, but I know that Dominique and Carla certainly know that I recently started a nonprofit organization called Church of the Goddess, and which currently doesn't even exist because I'm not done with the website. But once it does, it is a church that begins its life online. But part of our long-term vision statement is purchasing old churches in the United States and converting them into churches of the goddess. So that is the long-term plan. The immediate plan is to create a sacred space that essentially only exists online and have a loosely structured religion, if you will, that is really just a unifying umbrella for all the goddess paths that exist, particularly after having read and talked to and done several episodes with Liz Kelly, who wrote Home to Her, because here in the United States, we often overlook the fact that, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of goddess paths in the world. We exist in every country, on every continent, on the globe. So there are sisters walking in goddess path just everywhere. There are so many of us, there are so many paths, so many more that I'm sure that even between the four of us, we are not even aware of. So just a place or a name that we can all call our own, where we can come together and learn from each other. and especially in the US, break out of our stereotype of all these women that seem to be in charge of our spirituality are more than just, the white women online, because we are more than that. Thank you, Dominique, um, for being here to represent, so to speak. So brick and mortar churches.
Mhm.
This is a dream that I have personally, and I have spoken to other women who have that dream. I feel personally that there is something to be said and something to be gained for sacred space. And yes, sacred space can be created outside, especially since much of divine feminine spirituality is about nature and being in the world and being with her creation and connection to the earth. However, I would argue that there is also something very divine in a space in which women gather week after week, month after month, year after year, and there's a holiness about that, right? And I know that these are triggering terms, and we're going to talk about that too, right? The word church, the word holy. So let's start there. The space itself, I think, could be really useful to women who walk a goddess path. Let's start there, and whoever wants to go first, just unmute yourself and speak at will, and don't be shy.
I could actually start. So, what's been interesting about my goddess journey is that I came to Women's Spirit a little over a year ago, Women's Spirit Reclamation, and the online community is amazing. I'm in touch with women who have been priestesses for years and years, maybe decades, women who are very familiar with in-person like events and ceremonies and things like that. For me, if it wasn't for the online space, I wouldn't even know that this kind of community existed. I mean, truly. Like I know Molly Remmer of Bridget's Grove. She comes to our events a lot, and I know she's been doing in-person ceremonies for decades. So there is something really incredible about the doors that have opened up with the online space. But there is always for me a desire and a longing for that in-person space or that in-person ceremony, right? I feel like if you go back in history, when there were priestesses, when there was goddess worship, there was always that communal existence. There was always the temple, there was always the center where you could go and commune. And I mean, another thing that I kind of dream of is being able to be like an asset to the community, whether we have gardening available, whether we're feeding people. I just feel like so much love and nurturing could come from an in-person space. Something interesting is that I was first introduced to the goddess so randomly. There's a book called The Sophia Code by Kaya Ra. I found that book randomly. This was when I was just out of college, and I found it in a bookstore, and I was like, huh, it just called to me. And I started reading it, and I was in Santa Barbara at the time. And in Santa Barbara, there's another place. There's a place called Sacred Space. It's amazing. There's like a lot of statues. There's a little store. You can go there and sit by the fountains and the statues, and they bring you tea. So I brought my book to this sacred space, this temple, and I just did like self initiation. Like I was reading from Hathor, I was reading from Isis and Green Tara, and that physical space really changed something for me. I mean, it really made a difference. So it really felt non-denominational. I mean, it felt like something where anyone could come and just practice spirituality any way they wish to. There wasn't really a communal aspect of that, but there was a Buddhist temple I was going to at the time that did have a little bit of community. So I just know there's like a resonance. Like I know that there's a particular kind of thing that could be created that would be very beneficial to goddess worshipers, but just to everyone.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Flora?
Sure, I'll jump in. I can't quite reconcile the idea of a unified goddess church. I'm going to be totally honest. Um, my introduction, on the path was like women's circles around a bonfire in like someone's backyard. This is 1992, 1993, right? 1994. But I'm also aware of my perspective as a Generation X, and being raised by parents that had left the church. And I think that as more generations happen, where the church going is not a given anymore as it was in past, that the wounds that we have around religion, the church wounds that we have, are lessening, because of that, there is a gap, I feel, in our society. There is a void that, because of the lack of communal worship or communal prayer, or coming together in communities to to engage in spiritual conversation. That's why those spaces like churches, synagogues, mosques, right, all over the world, they provide that really necessary and vitally important space for us as as a culture, and right down to the family level. Um, so in 2023 here, I feel like we're still in very much a transition. But I love being part of this conversation, because I'm really thinking, like, what would that look like if there was a brick and mortar goddess church in my own community? Like, how could I not go to that? Right now, of course, a lot of these events that happen in yoga studios. If they're
Right.
not happening outside, they're happening in yoga studios. And of course, yoga studios are beautiful. The other thing that I'm really aware of is that my path has been very feminine focused. And I'm starting to even feel how, I mean, I have been for the last few years. I have a son, and I don't, and for us to achieve the kind of balance and harmonization that we really seek, we can't keep the men out entirely. So where are these spaces? And maybe it's not what you're talking about, but that we can all come together, all of us, right? Where we're all welcome, men, women, and children. Like, I've been really sitting with, how do I start to include my 9-year-old son in some of my pagan practices around the wheel of the year? I don't want this to just be something that I do in private. I want him to be aware of it. And of course, he can choose how much he wants to participate. So to the pro of having this actual physical space is certainly how it can bring people together and really fill that deep need for us to commune in community. Yeah.
Right. And I was going to say, Flora, I too am Generation X. I turned 51 this year. So when I think about, that kind of, I had told Dominique in a conversation with her that's the pushback I anticipate is, well, then you're just telling the same, what your vision is, then you're just retelling the same patriarchal story. But I don't see it that way. I see it as rewriting the story, right? Like, it might look the same, but it's not the same. It's not the
Absolutely.
same, right? Because I'm talking about having a priestess at the altar, thus my series, Priestess at the Altar, right? Because it's not a priest, and I'm not telling you that you're going to be punished because you did so and so. I'm speaking from the altar, telling you that you don't have to ask to be forgiven because the goddess doesn't judge you. And in terms of community, I agree with what you're saying. Like, I have to wrap my head around the fact that not all men are evil, and it's about the patriarchal model that needs to be dismantled, not men needing to be dismembered. Right.
Mhm.
um, Now, granted that, I mean, that's a whole other conversation, but in terms of community, one of the things that I put together in, these bylaws and descriptions of community guidelines was exactly what you're talking about, that as a church, right, that one of the things that we would do is be a church in the communities in which these brick and mortar buildings exist, which means we participate in things like food drives, clothing drives, um, bringing pastoral care to the homeless or to poverty in our community, and just like any other church would do. So I agree with you 100%. Carla, did you have something to add?
I have thoughts.
I could tell. I could read your facial expression.
I have no. Okay, so there's a couple of things. The first thing I have to say that I do love the idea on a personal and professional level of taking over churches and giving them to the goddess. I think many of you all know that whenever I travel to goddess sites, there's always a church on top of it or near it, and it's my biggest pet peeve because there's like men, not all men, but most men, taking like, marking their territory, and it drives me nuts. Like, it just drives me nuts. But it's a battle I can't win, so it's not one I try to fight. But I love the idea of taking over these buildings and redoing the arts and taking apart the pews and creating circular let's say prayer circles rather than the lineup, and like just rethinking and revisualizing the spots for the goddess. I love that idea, and I love the community outreach. And it's funny that we all, and so far all the women I've been talking about that are starting spaces, whether it's online or whatever, all of us are talking about ways to incorporate work that helps the community. And so I think it's something that just will come naturally as we build these spaces, because everyone is like, yes, and I'd also like to like maybe feed people or have women come that maybe they normally can't come, but perhaps we can do a scholarship for them, for, let's say, if we have courses. Or for me, like for the center I want to have in Crete, I would like to have people come and stay in exchange for maybe their art or maybe their teach, so that there would be a collaborative, not collaborative, I'm getting bored of that word, but there's like an exchange of energy, like come and stay in the sacred space, and in exchange you can do this thing because we need it, or something.
Like a quid pro quo, a quid pro
Yeah.
quo.
Yeah, like we're kind of rebuilding structures that have been passed down to us as far as worship, because worship in, let's say, in Christianity especially, but many religions, is hierarchical. And so I like the idea of creating worship that is spiral, like more of a spiral rather than a pyramid, So yeah, I'm totally pro brick and mortar. The only thing that will be a challenge, I think, especially for all of us up and coming, is funding. Finding the money, because this is real estate. There are taxes, even if, if you're a nonprofit, you got to pay, So I think one of the hurdles that women have is finding the women that have the money to invest in the vision. Like, I don't know, I don't yet prefer to ask men for things because it tends to be like, yeah, I'm going to give you $1 million, but then I want it to look like this and I want it to be like, so finding, I would say, women that have the wealth and the want to invest in the vision as we have, because I think that's one of the biggest hurdles, is money. Like, we still live in a capitalistic world, or capitalist world. So how do we get the money? Right. And even like feeding the hungry takes money, and housing people takes money, and all of that takes money. And so I don't know, are we at a place where we can raise those funds, like, or is this a time, because people are kind of broke-ish, right? Like, right? So how do you get that started? How do you make it work? For a brick and mortar, I mean. For an online, it might be a little different, but for a brick and mortar, yeah.
I think that, I mean, I think that, and you and I have had conversations about this. I think that as the community grows, the money will come. I don't know. I mean, I have to rely on my own faith to believe that when the time arrives, the pieces and the people to make that happen will fall into place. That's all I can do, right? I mean, I felt called to do this thing. I have to believe that then she has a plan to make that thing happen. And this is where we usually butt heads, because Carla is very pragmatic and I am my head is in the clouds. So that's why we work well together. So, yeah, because that is, that's an issue. But if I focus too much on that is what will keep me up at night and convince me that it's just a pipe dream and blah blah blah. And I try not to put myself through that torture today. But then I imagine, so let's think of that though in pragmatic and practical ways. Even just looking at what that real estate market looks like, what I would consider realistically affordable churches for sale are in very rural areas. So, say we had the capital to buy one building. It's going to be in, redneck central Indiana. And then what happens?
Yeah, exactly. It's not necessarily the center that you're imagining. I mean,
exactly.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add that really currently the actual temple spaces, ceremonial spaces the physical that I know of are on private properties, right? Like
Yes.
they're women that have, yeah, had the funds to invest in their own property, and a lot of them are yurts, right? Pop up a yurt on the property. My mentor, for example, and so I know that space because when you walk into that yurt, you feel what you're talking about, Kelly, that it's a place of dedicated to the goddess. So yeah, right now we're in that period because I'm in the same. My Earth Song Temple is entirely online right now, but within the next year or two, my wife and I are planning to buy a bigger property, and one of the things on the list is there space on the property for me to hold events? Could I put up a yurt? or would it be outdoor events in the summer months? So that's beautiful, and I'm glad we have these private spaces, and it takes it to the next level of visibility and really relevancy when we can be in a public space and a very visible part of the community and an active part of the community. So I really hold this vision with you.
I do too, and I'm hoping that it becomes something like an annual retreat that's in a different place every year until we can have a permanent place every year. And then from those funds, then we start buying up the churches. Maybe that's the path, right? Because when you have an annual conference, you raise money. I mean, of course, you have to cover the cost of creating the conference. But then usually there's a little left over. I don't know. Maybe that's how it works. Maybe that's how the capital comes, by hosting an annual conference. Or by hosting an annual conference in partnership with other organizations. Like I could totally see co-hosting an annual conference with between the Girlfriend God and Earth Song Temple and Woman Spirit Reclamation and the Artemis Center and, 5 other organizations. I mean, I think between a bunch of us, we could pull something like that off, right? Just like you, Flora, did the 3-day event with all your speakers that Carla and I met at. I mean, we're doing more and more of these online 3-day retreats, and some are free and some are paid. And I think what we're seeing online is just going to start to happen in person. So I think it's a good thing that the Church of the Goddess starts online and then it becomes a thing that happens in person. I mean, that's been the plan all along. And I know that Carla would love to just go out and start buying up real estate, but blow your roll a little bit.
I love some real estate. Just give me the money. I'll buy all the things. Yeah. Mhm.
And I guess I do see we have to not compete with one another in that way, right? Because when we do these things, we do have to consider capitalism and what that does to us. Oh, I know what I was going to say. I was going to say what I envision is like what the Michigan Women's Festival did for 30 years or however long that event existed, but the Michigan Goddess Festival, you know what I mean? Where women and these organizations come from all the corners of the United States because, we are lacking. Like, you guys do all these kinds of things in Canada and in Europe, but, the US is very late to the goddess game in terms of, I mean, we have all these witches down here, but they're all about empowerment and, creating their own destiny and harnessing their magic. But nobody's talking about communing with the divine and having a spiritual life and being of service to others. That's the problem that I see with this appealing to the market in the US because we are too self-involved. This is my opinion, not debatable after the show. Thoughts? Dominique, you're here with me in the US.
Yeah, I mean, when we're talking about funding and not competing, I really do feel like strengthening the network is really what's going to get us to that next step of in-person like communion, right? Like, sorry, my dog's just distracted me. Um, there's just so many thoughts that I have in my head. So, like Kelly, you had brought up to me, you just wanted to start the church because you were a little worried that someone else might start the church before you. The way I'm seeing it, right? But the way, and I think you would agree with me, but the way I see it, Carla, you have the Goddess or the Artemis Institute, right? And I know like the Lilith Institute by Deborah Gran, right? There's so many communities that I've been coming in contact with that I just see us as having like these common goals. And so I feel like the more we strengthen our networks and like it is online right now, but I mean, in the future, I'm planning to travel. Like the amount of women I know across the country now versus like 2 years ago is outrageous. And I just feel like as we start to travel and like group up in these locations and like build our network, I really think that's where the money would come from or the access. Like, who knows? It's like, oh, maybe this person here has this property or this person over here. Like, I know we're trying to be pragmatic, but I do feel like a piece of it is trust in the goddess. But the most pragmatic thing I think we're doing right now is strengthening these networks and see where our common goals lie. And I find that to be really exciting. Like, I've talked to Liz Childs Kelly. I've talked to Lorraine Montague. She's the author of Brujas, The Magic and Power of Witches of Color. I've talked to Louisa Tish. I've just talked to so many people and I'm starting to make these connections. And, something about my generation, I'm about to turn 30 this year. And I just feel like for some of us, depending on where we are, this is just unknown to us. Like when I came into this community and found out just so much. Like there's people I've been introduced to. I don't know if you're familiar with Max Dashu. She has yes. I'd never heard of her, and apparently she's legend. And I'm getting into her material, and I'm making connections with this over here. And I really think this is just the beginning. I think there's so much like potential and opportunity right now, and I really feel like our biggest asset is strengthening our connections. And also, like people in my group, I'm one of the youngest members in Women's Spirit Reclamation. And so we're all thinking about how are we going to reach out? How are we going to connect to the younger generation, even if it's, teenagers? And I actually have some really interesting ideas. My partner's really into video games, and so am I. And I have this, I mean, the amount of tools that are coming out right now that you can work with are insane. So there's a game that I actually want to make, and it would have several components. It would have a component where you can kind of like go around and explore caves. Maybe you could go meditate, explore a temple. But there's an asset that came out that is like, okay, there's a game called Skyrim. And in Skyrim, you can find books and collect books, and you can read these little books. I have the idea of putting goddess information in these little books. And like, can you imagine being a teenager or even being like a grown woman and just collecting your little goddess tomes, and then you can put them in your house? And so I'm getting a little off topic, but I really think we're just at the beginning of like the ways we can strengthen our communities and networks. I mean, look at like the power of corporations, right? They have so much power because they've been turned into like conglomerates again and again over time. And so I think it's just a matter of like being able, I'm really about decentralization, but when we're able to centralize resources based on common needs and wants, I think that's where it's going to pop off. So this makes me very excited.
I love that. Oh my God, Dominique. I love all of that. I love all of that. And I just have to say that I love having you here and you being so excited about the goddess, because I think one of my things is, it's like, sometimes I feel, okay, well, I have limited time. How do we leave this behind? What legacy are we leaving behind? And so my daughter, because she's mine, I can see that she's into all of these things. She was always a witch from she was a little kid. She just told me, Mom, I'm a witch, so like get over it, right? Which is very exciting for me. And so that to me, but I don't I don't always go hang out with her friends, though they're coming on Sunday, so I'm going to give them some goddess talk. But right, but it's like, so like to have younger people and young people excited, and to have these tools that you're mentioning that I have no idea, and to collect these virtual tomes. I love that idea. I don't know what you got to do to make that happen, but to put like this information into the hands of others and younger in a fun way, so it's not preachy and it's not like top down. I mean, to some degree, like, when you're an expert or you have this knowledge, it's one thing, but like not like you must do this and these are the rules of goddess worship, and this is what it takes to be a Wiccan, and you must follow a 1 to 7 or else you will pay in the fires of hell, this kind of thing. uh so just it makes me excited to hear that, and I'm so excited that to get, because I think that would be an extra layer that I don't know anything about, but it would be you clearly have all this knowledge. So I'm like, let's do all of that, let's do all of the things she said, kind of thing.
I was just going to say that I think that the other thing that's really crucial, so Flora, I've had many conversations with Carla about this, and I think I talked to you about this, Dominique. I feel like our like these first wave of goddess feminist superstars, they're in an age now where they're dying off or they're about to die off. And like women that I've recorded for this third season that starts in August, women like Glennis Livingstone and Devorah Gren and Miriam Dexter and all of those women, they're in their 70s and their 80s now. So I consider them like the first wave. They're these foremothers of this goddess feminist spirituality kind of movement. And I think that we, like you, me, Carla, Monette, a number of other people whose names aren't coming to mind right now are like the second wave of that. And people people Dominique's age and younger, these are like the third wave. And I get excited when I talk to you, Dominique, and people younger than you, because you have the energy and the drive and the ideas. I mean, I still consider myself a creative person, but I only have so much energy and time, just like Carla, and resources to think outside the box. And I can still get old and curmudgeon-y in my ways. And um, and I just have to tell you, and we can have a longer conversation about that, but it's really ironic that you think about video games as a way to connect, because you've heard me talk about the Fillionists, and the Fillionists in the 70s, the first wave Fillionists, that's what they were doing. They were building like whatever the computer, like .ms what was like the 80s computer thing where
You
you
mean
would have
Atari?
made, no, like before Atari, where you would just do it on like a desktop computer.
Was it MS-DOS?
Yes, like an
MS-DOS?
MS-DOS game. They were building a world that would be equivalent to like Second Life now.
I don't know what
So they were building this world called Aristasia, which was this goddess world. Anyway, it's freaky and ironic that you mentioned that, because that was their idea back in the 70s of how to get people hooked in to this goddess way of life and this goddess spirituality. So ironic that you would say that. Speaking of information, because I agree, and we've talked about that a lot this season, that information is key to continue to build momentum. So one of the ways I think we can share information, both with new people interested and young people interested in goddess spirituality, and with each other. While I'm building the website for Church of the Goddess, I had this idea about a centralized goddess library. So I was going to ask people like you, Flora, and everybody else that I've come into contact with, my network, so to speak, and all the people I've met since I started the podcast, to share with me any PDFs that they have, and build a digital library of resources that anybody that comes to the website can access and download for free. I've got journal articles, PDFs of books. Like I have a PDF of Liz Kelly's book and a bunch of Girl God. I'm going to ask Girl God books if they would give me permission to use a bunch of their books, and find some open source library software so that I can, so that it's not clunky, so that I can catalog everything and make it nice and pretty on the website, so that people have a resource to go to where they can download a bunch of stuff to learn about goddess spirituality and different goddess paths, and over time build a really incredible and one of a kind digital library for the goddess and for people who want to learn about the goddess. What do you guys think about that? And then when we have those brick and mortar churches, we can have physical libraries inside each of the churches.
Yeah. I think as a lover of libraries that are sort of, hanging on by a thread, I would love the idea of
Oh, they're
spending
not
my
hanging
time,
on by a thread.
says the librarian.
Says the librarian. Yes, that's absolutely right. Says the librarian.
But we don't, like, for example, at the university where I'm at, we did a poll recently, and the stats showed that first and second year students had never even stepped in the library in their first and second years. And that less and less students use the library, which is quite sad. The online research base is good because they download the PDFs, like you're saying, they download the material. But the actual spaces, although my daughter seems to love books, like real books, like she likes to hold on to books. So I was like, okay, that's sort of a, so I would love to walk into a sacred space and have a space where you could just pick a book out of the shelves of the books, just sit and read and just chill, you know? That would really be amazing. Yeah.
Unfortunately, in academia, you are correct, because here at the university in the undergraduate library, they pulled out, they ripped out like an entire floor of books to put in more computer terminals.
Yeah.
And moved everything to the stacks. So
Yeah.
that's a bummer. But I think outside of academia, reading is alive and well, and our public libraries thrive. They do.
Yeah, and what you're sharing, Kelly, is really, it's essential for different ideas and different paths, as you said, to be shared. And personally, I think that the more inclusive the Church of the Goddess is of the many different lineages that there are, I don't know if you've read, Lisa Lister's book, Witch, Unleashed, Untamed, Unapologetic. But when her list of all the different Wiccan traditions and goddess traditions like blew my mind, because there were so many that I had never heard of. So I really respect the research that she's done around that. And anytime we try to centralize something, it's interesting that, Dominique, that you're saying, mostly being a fan of decentralizing things, and yet we know the value in centralizing some things, especially when there is a common goal. The thing is, witches and priestesses were rebels by nature. So any attempt to kind of corral is met with just that, no, like, my path, my way. And so many of us are finding our spirituality in very eclectic, in eclectic ways, of course, because even our understanding of our own heritage and ancestry and through DNA research has really, I mean, that's been personally mind-blowing as well. And so I guess what I'm saying is that the concept of that library would be physical, digital, and then ultimately could be a physical, of that the Church of the Goddess isn't this one way and one way to pray, and that it's not the top down. The more inclusive it can be in sharing the beauty of all these different paths. And it could be more of like a coalition, or like a hub that people can plug into and share, like, hey, I've got this happening here, and hey, I've got this happening here. Like, if that becomes the ultimate vision of it, then there's room for everyone.
I see what you're saying, and that is kind of more what I meant, I guess, when I say unifying. I mean, unifying in, like, maybe what that looks like is, if we buy up these old churches, that means that those churches are then available to any organization and any priestess or any spiritual woman, whatever, who had, like, if they live in that area and there's a Church of the Goddess there, they can use it for an event or a class or a workshop, or, yeah, man, why not?
That actually makes good real estate sense too.
Yeah, it really does. Or, for a small rental fee or whatever. And that keeps building our capital to buy more churches. I
It's
like
clear
that.
who the Capricorn is here in this conversation. Can I just call a spade a spade?
Just give me the verse, we will make money. I tell her all the time, like, when she asks me, she's like, what do you think about church? I'm like, so I'll take the real estate, I'll take the money, I'll take the, investments. I've got it, but I love that idea, actually, because you're right, Flora. Like, if we make sure that the message, which I think you had a message that I really liked, where you said something, Kelly, about like 1,000 goddesses, or something. It was, you phrased it really well, where it was like, there's all these goddesses, everyone is welcome under this church. But I think that would also help solve the problem of what we've been talking about, which is that we're gathering in private spaces. But here we would have a more public space that then you could, just have your own, whatever, your own group of women or whatever, your 13 witches can come and do a ritual. And what I would love about that idea from a spiritual perspective is the different energies of different goddesses arriving in a similar actual space. I mean,
Right.
after a while, I think walking into a space like that, you would feel that vibration. It would be really interesting.
You definitely would. You would definitely feel the energy of such a place.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's, we're starting from scratch. And so it takes a bit to maybe, perhaps, like you say, Dominique, the networking is sort of the strengthening that is part of, how do you raise that funding or that whatever, that availability to start. But I think once you start, this could be quite viable. I think the interest is out there, the thirst is out there. It's just maybe we're all little pockets now of individual groups or smaller groups, and so we have yet to unite. I do think the word church, though, throws some people off, because I know that was my biggest thing too.
Too late. That's the domain. Too late. That's the domain name.
I know. So this is why I tell Kelly, I say, you really have to work on like making sure they understand it's not like, dude's church. But maybe something about the States. Like sometimes I think it works in the States. I was just having this conversation this morning because I thought maybe there may be some women that are more comfortable with the word church.
Maybe.
And not so much goddess worship or witch. So perhaps this gateway that you're opening, Kelly, might let them come in and learn about all these other goddesses, and then they can do whatever they want with that. And so perhaps, because sometimes when you say witch, people go, "Oh, witch."
Yeah.
There's if I can tell my friend, my neighbor, that I'm going to the witch temple.
Right.
But if they say Church of the Goddess, so we may get more, we may give other women more access. Yeah, that's my thing with the word church, because for myself personally, having grown up in the church, I'm like, oh God, no. But you did sell me on it. So I was like, and like I said, replacing the churches with the goddess is like, I just want to jump around in glee and be like, no, it's mine, it's mine, it's mine, it's mine. We're going to do what we want with it. We're gonna take out all these pews and we're gonna put, I don't know, kumbaya pillows on the floor. Like, so there's a little bit of that happening on my side.
That's so ideal to me, though, like to provide the space we need. Like, I don't think we all need to sit in some pews and all listen to like one person. I think we need to be in school. We need to lay down. Like, we need to rest. There's a book that I love called Rest is Resistance. And the key to so much healing or undoing, if you want to call it colonization, is in rest. I mean, around the same time that I found the Sophia Code, I was also in therapy. And in therapy, I had access to like meditation and yoga, and so much came alive in me that I had no idea existed. Like, I didn't even know how much was there until I literally laid down and someone said, you can breathe. We were doing breath work and so much came up. So I just feel like what really fills the need of the people or of women, however you want to see it. And I think a big one is just being able to sit and rest and do breath work. And another thing about like the things coming alive, like the reason I get so excited about sharing this information, like sharing about the goddess, is I feel like we all have these latent memories that when you read something or hear something else comes alive that you didn't even know was there. And that's why I get so excited about it. Like, if it was just random information that wasn't relevant to people, then I would feel whatever about it. But there really is. I even talk to my 13-year-old sister about this stuff sometimes, and I feel like she starts to have some little awakenings. Like, when I told her that the original Aramaic our father actually meant "oh birther," she started calling God the birther. And it's just because it felt familiar to her. So I don't mean to get us off topic, but there's just so much familiarity that can come alive when we have that space to rest and to like reflect and recognize. Even in Max Dashu's work, going through her archive felt like such a breath of fresh air. I grew up chemically straightening my hair, and I've had it natural for the last couple of years. And in Max Dashu's work, I saw these women with hair shaped like mine, and they have arms over their head in a heart. And this is from thousands of years ago. And I was like, this is what they were showing as holy. And this is thousands of years ago. So there's so much potential for just awakening and like all across the spectrum of so many cultures. And there's just so much potential.
Guys, I gotta go. I hate to ruin this, but I gotta go in a few
Oh,
minutes.
that's all right.
I have a thing at 4.
Okay. I think we're good. We
But I
good?
think, yeah, I just think we could spend a few hours talking about this. So we may have
Good.
to return for
But
the
I like
yeah.
these. This is the second panel one that we've done. Carla, you were in my first one too. Flora, if you like this and you like these panel discussions, happy to invite you to future ones.
Yeah.
Especially this is going to be an ongoing discussion, I think. So, okay, ladies. Well, onward with your day. I'm not going to ask you all the 3 questions because you've all already answered them once. But I am going to say that until I speak to you each again, may the peace and the love of the goddess be with you. Go forth and have a great day and spread the love of the goddess to all who you encounter.
Thank you, Kelly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Bye.